Hello everyone, I am Dr. Anjum Rashid. In this video, I will talk about idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which is also known as pseudotumor cerebri, or benign intracranial hypertension, or primary intracranial hypertension. Idiopathic intracranial hypertension or pseudotumor cerebri refer to cases where no clear causative agent for the increased intracranial pressure is found. These individuals can have risk factors such as female sex, post-pubertal status, obesity, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. However, these factors does not directly result in the increased intracranial pressure. Now, at the same time, it is important to know what is secondary intracranial hypertension. It is reserved for patients whose intracranial hypertension is the direct result of another medical condition or medications. Diagnosis of idiopathic intracranial hypertension is made after other causes of secondary intracranial hypertension have been excluded. Now here is a list of common causes of secondary, that is non-idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Medical conditions include cerebral venous thrombosis, meningitis or meningoencephalitis, intracranial hemorrhage, brain tumor, hydrocephalus, Chiari malformation, traumatic brain injury, demyelinating diseases such as multiple sclerosis, otitis media, mastoiditis, Lyme disease, varicella, recurrent varicella zoster infection, severe anemia, leukemia or lymphoma, pregnancy and eclampsia, Crohn's disease, refeeding syndrome, adrenal insufficiency, hypoparathyroidism, vitamin A deficiency, systemic lupus erythematosus, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, Addison disease or sleep apnea. Medication which can cause secondary or non-idiopathic intracranial hypertension include tetracycline, growth hormone, corticosteroids, especially withdrawal, lithium carbonate, cyclosporin A, cytarabine, nalidixic acid, retinoic acid, vitamin A excess, vitamin D deficiency, and oral contraceptives. So, it is important to note that diagnosis of idiopathic intracranial hypertension is made after all these causes of secondary intracranial hypertension have been excluded on the basis of history, clinical examination, and necessary laboratory workup. Pathogenesis of idiopathic intracranial hypertension or pseudotumor cerebri. Now, precise mechanism is unknown. However, factors that may play a role in pathogenesis include excessive cerebrospinal fluid, extracellular edema, increased venous sinus pressure, or defective cerebrospinal fluid absorption. Now, the clinical manifestation of idiopathic intracranial hypertension. It is rare in children under 10 years of age. It is more common in female sex, and these individuals are usually obese. Now, prepubertal children have lower incidence of obesity and there is no sex predilection. In idiopathic intracranial hypertension, headache is the most frequent symptom. It is present in almost all cases. It is chronic, that is weeks to months. It is frontal in nature, but it may be diffuse. It is usually constant with some variability in severity throughout the day, and it is most often severe in the morning. It is exacerbated by maneuvers such as Valsalva, lying supine, bending over, or coughing. In these patients, visual symptoms also occur, and the important ones are transient visual obscuration, which lasts for about seconds. It is a graying out or loss of vision which is associated with postural changes or Valsalva maneuvers. There may be horizontal diplopia, which is secondary to dysfunction of the abducent nerve. There may be photophobia or blurred vision. Other non-specific symptoms include vomiting, which is rarely persistent and insidious. There may be pulsatile tinnitus, dizziness, lethargy, and irritability. There may be clumsiness and paresthesia, However, the child is usually alert with no constitutional symptoms. Now the physical examination. In this, ophthalmic examination is crucial for the diagnosis. On ophthalmic examination, papil edema is the most consistent finding in idiopathic intracranial hypertension. It is typically bilateral, but it may be asymmetrical or unilateral. There is also enlarged blind spot and inferior nasal or peripheral visual field defect. There is also weakness of one or both of the abducent nerves. And rest of the neurologic examination in idiopathic intracranial hypertension is normal. Now laboratory workup for idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Neuroimaging include cranial MRI. If MRI is unavailable, then contrast enhanced CT scan can be used. Now in these cases, there is normal brain parenchyma without evidence of hydrocephalus, mass or structural lesion, and there is no abnormal meningeal enhancement. In idiopathic intracranial hypertension, cranial MRI may show empty cilia, flattening of the posterior aspect of the globe, or distension of the perioptic subarachnoid space, with or without a tortuous optic nerve. Another important neuroimaging which should be done is cranial magnetic resonance venography, that is MRV. It may show tapering or stenosis of transverse venous sinus in this idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Lumbar puncture is also an important part of the workup, and in these patients, CSF examination has normal composition. An important finding in these patients is elevated lumbar puncture opening pressure, that is more than or equal to 250 mm of mercury in case of adults and more than or equal to 280 mm of mercury in case of children or obese adults. Now the treatment of idiopathic intracranial hypertension. These include weight loss regime, especially in obese children, low salt diet, stop the offending drug or the steroids. Now the initial diagnostic lumbar puncture may be therapeutic. Spinal needle produces a small opening in the dura that allows the CSF to escape the subarachnoid space, thus reducing the intracranial pressure. Several additional lumbar taps and removal of sufficient CSF to reduce the opening pressure by 50% usually lead to resolution of this process. Medical treatment for these patients include acetazolamide in a dose of 10 to 30 mg per kilogram per day, topiramate, furosemide or corticosteroids in severe cases. Surgical interventions include ventriculoperitoneal or lumboperitoneal shunts in severe cases. Optic nerve sheath fenestration can be done in refractory cases. Now the complications of idiopathic intracranial hypertension or pseudotumor cerebri. In these cases, optic atrophy and blindness is the most significant complication. Follow-up in these patients should include serial monitoring of visual function, that is visual acuity, color vision and visual fields. Serial optic nerve examination, that is fundoscopy, should also be done. Optical coherence tomography is useful to serially follow changes in papil edema. Serial visual evoked potentials are useful if the visual acuity cannot be reliably documented. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, share, comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel.